So the Wuthering Waves beta has been out for a few days now, and I have played well over 20 hours of it. I've done enough of the story. I've done enough of the character quests and the combat to get a really good sense of what the game has to offer. So I feel that I could give my honest review to you guys. And don't worry, it's not super one-sided to Wuthering Waves. This is just my honest review of the game. Okay. So starting off with the introduction, and by the way, I'm going to try and keep a new player perspective in mind here, okay? So for the introduction, the opening cinematic is great. You know, you wake up to that amnesia type plot, which is a bit tired, but that's what they do for these gacha games. And then you get into that tutorial boss. Now, apparently it was harder in CBT1. I can't really speak to that, but I can say that it was very, very easy. It was super easy. I understand why they did that, to get players, you know, to have their onboarding process come a little easier to the game. They also introduced the basics of combat to you there, right? The dodge, parry, and then your just simple attack sequence. And I don't know if they went over ensembles, i.e., elemental reactions, but they need to go more in depth with the ensembles and how to do them. You have to be able to know that if you mix fusion with glacio, you buff your ultimates, right? You need to know that if you mix fusion or fusion with arrow, that it does something different. They need to have a more in-depth system like that. Speaking about what they need to explain more, their talent trees. Character talent trees are very confusing at the moment. As of right now, there are certain, like the fourth attack in a sequence is actually called its own resonance skill. And so, like, there's these keywords everywhere in the talent tree. It says do this, but nowhere in the talent tree does it explain how you do that, or do you know what I mean? It's very confusing. There's a lot of these keywords, and I think they need to, explain that a bit better. Now, as far as it goes, as like in depth as it is, it's great, right? For players who want like in depth combat, it is in depth as you want it to be. If you learn a character's talent tree to the best of your ability, and you're aware that when you do your third attack in the sequence and then you do your ensemble right into your liberation, that applies a debuff, right? There is a lot of this in-depth combat. It just comes with the knowledge of knowing what your character is capable of. And if not, right, for like casual players, you probably could just like click away and swap and dodge, and you'll probably be fine. So I think this is good, right? If you want the in-depth combat, it's there. If you don't, you don't have to. Speaking about combat, the combat overall is very fun. It's great in my opinion. However, they need to work on the camera. The camera work is awful. It is terrible. They really need to fix this stuff. There are times where the camera is like behind a wall and you can't see what's going on the battlefield. And then the lock-on system is arguably even worse, right? There are times where you'll be fighting 6 mobs, you're locked onto one, you kill one, and it'll lock onto the furthest enemy away from you. And it's like, why didn't it just lock onto the guy right next to me, right? It's very bad. It also seems like there's times where you can't unlock on, right? You're just like, when you enter combat and you lock on, you're stuck there until you're out of combat, and it's really bad. So I think they need to improve that quite a bit. Also, speaking about this, they need to allow players to use keybinds and swap keys, especially for combat and stuff. Like, just, like, one of my biggest gripes with it is that the grapple is you have to use the T key to do that, and it feels so bad. It feels so bad. I would much rather just use one of my mouse buttons to grapple. They need to allow you to change these kinds of things. And then if they changed all of those things, I think the combat would honestly be fantastic. I think it would 100% be great. Another thing I would like to touch on here is I think they need to give you an incentive to play other characters aside from their element, right? There needs to be an incentive to play a character just aside from their element, right? That shouldn't be the only reason that you're creating a composition is purely based on because if you swap to that character, it will give you the buff from doing this ensemble. Like that, it feels bad. They need to give an incentive, make buffers or healers more valuable aside from their element. And again, like I said, I think if they change all of these things, the combat will be fantastic. Fantastic. It is great combat. Now, I will say this. is the combat too easy? Thus far in the game, for me, it has been too easy. Now, I guess at level 27, you can do this game mode where you have, you know, like scaling bosses and they can get harder and harder. And that's great, right? Because apparently that's very difficult, which does tell me that somewhere in the game, they do have a place for the players who want the difficult combat. They have a place for players who want that, you know, kind of end game-esque combat, and that's fantastic. Before I had heard about the level 27 bosses, I was saying that they should just add an easy, normal, and hard mode to the game, because I feel like that would cater to all players, right? Your casual phone players who just want easy combat, experience the story, and then like your much more hardcore players who want to do this on PC and make videos about it, or whatever. But it seems like they've essentially taken an easy, normal, and hard mode and put it into the game just way later, right? They put it behind a union level wall, essentially. But you know, it is what it is. As long as it's in there, I think I will be happy. My final thing on the combat is that if they fix those, it'll be great. So let's dive into the world exploration of the game, which is a big part of these open world RPGs. I think it's great, man. I honestly do. Aside from some of the camera work and there being a few bugs, I honestly do think that it is great, right? You could run around, go collect chests. Even actually right after that first tutorial boss, you're given a quest to go to the city, but if you want, you can just ignore that and go explore relatively fast into the introduction of the game, which is great, right? Giving players options is a great thing. You could just go explore relatively quick. You can go get your chests, you can solve these puzzles, and the puzzles, they are rather unique, and they are somewhat challenging, right? And they are different enough from each other that it is nice, right? The world exploration is good. The whole wall running thing, I don't know how I feel about that quite yet. I think I'd have to play it more, but you know, the grapple is okay as long as they let you change the keybind. And then the gliding, you know, it's the usual typical gacha RPG exploration, and it's good. So moving on to like the story, I didn't play the first closed beta, so I don't know. Apparently it was really bad, but I can speak to this story, and I can say that it's okay, right? The introduction to the quest, like you're left with a mystery. You're trying to figure out why you have amnesia, who you are, kind of thing. You go to the main city to try and speak to a lady who might know who you are and why you have amnesia. You then go to this small village and you run into Scar, and then this is when things really start to pick up and the story gets pretty interesting. And it was at this point in the story quest that I actually felt myself being engaged, right? And ever since then, in the story quest, I have been engaged. Well, actually, shortly after that, right, I needed to be a higher union level to continue. So I went and I did a character quest. I did Jion's character quest, and it was actually fantastic, even though it had no voice acting. There was no voice acting. I simply read the whole thing, and it was great. And I can tell that if they nail the voice acting right, that character quest is going to be awesome, because it's going to make us fall in love with that character and their backstory. And that's what we look for in these open world RPGs, right? I'm also going to chime in here on graphics, because the side quest made me think about it. The graphics that Wuthering Waves has done here in the characters' eyes and their face, they absolutely nail expressions and feeling in the face, and you can pick up on that like way more than other gachas, way more than Star Rail, way more than Genshin. Like the eye and facial work that they've done in Wuthering Waves is top notch. So if they combine that with fantastic voice acting, the quests are going to be great, man. That's just my personal opinion. I think it was awesome. I mean, I played a whole character story quest without any voice acting, simply read it, and I was still able to feel some emotion from that just through the writing, right? So that obviously does speak some volumes about kind of how some of the stuff is written. So the story's good, man. The character quest, it was good. And last but not least, let's talk about the ecosystem. I think it's rather unique, right? And it's not replacing it's not something entirely new that they're bringing to the table, right? Because essentially what the ecosystem is doing is replacing the relic or the artifact system. It's essentially your gear, right? It's how you get those extra stats to make your character stronger. But I will say this, how you get these relics is new. How you get them is bringing something new to the table, right? You got this Pokemon gotta catch 'em all type of grind. And would I even call it a grind? Yeah, probably late game it will be a bit of a grind, right? Because you're trying to get copies of just one echo, and I could see how that could be a bit repetitive. But for a new player, you essentially collect your gear just by exploring the open world and killing monsters and just collecting them, right? Like at first, I think you're just gonna try and collect as many as you can, and I think you will passively collect your gear via world exploration rather than going into a domain and repeating the same fight over and over, right? So I think this ecosystem is good. It's bringing something new to the table. And it's not going to feel as repetitive as some of the other gachas that we have all played, right? So I think it's good. Now, overall, some people might be mad, but I have to make the comparison to Genshin Impact because this is the very first game that has thrown its hat in the ring and is a legitimate competitor to Genshin Impact, okay? So I have to compare it to Genshin Impact. And I know, sorry, that's going to make some people mad, but there's only 2 of these games, right? And the second one is currently in beta. So ultimately, I think it's a slightly better Genshin. And again, that might make some people mad, but I'm going to say it again. It's a slightly better Genshin because the combat is way more in depth. The ecosystem is more entertaining. I don't know if the story will be better than Genshin. I actually kind of doubt that. You know, Hoyo is some pretty good story writers. But I can say at the end of the day, I do not think this game is being overhyped. I think it's being hyped appropriately because it's good. It is good. The combat, and admittedly, the combat carries it quite a bit, but it does it in the right way. It's good, man. It is a good game. It is fun. And I can tell you this, when Wuthering Waves comes out on launch, I will be playing this over Genshin Impact probably any day of the week. That's just my opinion. That's my full review of the game. They need to fix a lot of this stuff, and if they do, this game will be fantastic. And if you guys like this review, like some of the points I made up, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.